Hello, welcome back. I'm Dr. Oscar Hernandez, board certified internist and pediatrician. I'm reviewing a series of questions that my patients posed to me about the COVID-19 infection. I'm sharing them online with all our audience. Some of the things I'm going to say today are local. They have to do with testing sites in the area. But stay tuned because we have a little piece of information for everyone. I'm going to really try hard to finish up these questions that my patients have and sharing them with you today, and still have a little bit of time to talk about a very, very confusing topic that has to do with testing. We thought this was a very straightforward thing back when the epidemic started. We had one test, a polymerase chain reaction, which was a nasal swab that I demonstrated previously in one of my first videos, and this was the way to test for this virus. But we had wanted testing, and it's one of those stories of be careful what you wish for, or it might come true, because now we have a whole slew of different tests. And so there's confusion even among physicians as to what these tests mean, when they should be used, and what they are for, and how they should be interpreted. So in a way, we're learning together as we go along, because this is something new. Before I go on with all of that, I want to make reference to an opinion piece that was published in The Hill. The Hill is a political news magazine that is published online. And Dr. Scott Atlas writes an opinion piece on April 22nd, 2020. You can access this by going to The Hill and putting in the identifiers for this particular article. This is the title of the article. It says, "The data is in, stop the panic, end total isolation." That's not what today's talk is about. Ending isolation is a very complicated matter. There's a lot of political charge to it. But I urge our listeners who really are interested in a very well-reasoned position as to how and when to release some of the isolation precautions that we have. You should look at that piece. It's very good. It's found on The Hill. This is the gist of what Dr. Atlas says about the matter. It says the fatality rate is 0.1 to 0.2%. These are American numbers. And that's according to a Stanford University study that was posted on April 17 of this year on MedRxiv. This whole thing of quoting MedRxiv, MEDRXI, as in the letter IV, as in Victor, is a kind of newfangled approach. These are repository databases for research articles that in general have yet to be printed in peer-reviewed journals. I've mentioned this before. I want to mention it again because the data that is found on MedRxiv is data that has not been looked at and scrutinized by other physicians, public health officials, etc., as we would do when we actually publish medical data in the medical literature, the New England Medical Journal, the International Journal of Infectious Diseases, the Journal of the American Medical Association. There's a million of them. So you can access the data, you can look at it, but it hasn't exactly been peer-reviewed. So again, the Stanford study showed that there were a lot of infected people who never really had symptoms. And when you factor those people in to the mortality rate, we go into a mortality rate of 0.1 to 0.2%. And that's about 30 times less than what, actually 30 to 40 times less than what the World Health Organization had originally warned us about. So hopefully, the wolf appeared to be bigger than it really is, and that would be great. That's exactly what we want. Now, question one that many of my patients ask me. Well, question number how many now? I've reviewed it in some other videos. And here's one of them. Where can I get tested? Well, I tell my patients that they can get tested in my office, and that's pretty much universally true. But then we get comments and questions from patients outside our service area in the Miami area, and so I'm just going to rattle off some of the test sites that you can visit. And again, this is local information. The Youth Fair site, you guys know where it is. If you're in Iowa, you don't know where that is. Here in Miami, our listeners know. The Marlin Stadium, the Hard Rock Cafe, Amelia Earhart Park. Those are just some of them. If you want a complete list, you go to miamidade.gov. That's our county government website. And there's a subtext there for COVID-19. There's a pull down for COVID-19. You go to the COVID-19, you push test centers or how to get tested, and it'll come up with a bunch of them. and the telephone number to call for many of them if you want to go for some of these drive-through testing. Please call before you go. Many of these centers will only take people who have symptoms. If you're not symptomatic, they probably aren't going to test you. Get the details, miami-dade.gov. You can also get information from one of our House of Representatives, one of our federal Congress women at her website, Mucarsel-Powell Point House. So Mucarsel, Mucarsel-Powell, Powell dot, in other words, Point House, and you can go through her site, and they're all there. Okay, so that was question number one. Where can I get tested? And most of my patients know, for my patients, they can get tested in an office. This is lightning round of patient questions. We usually get a lot more detailed, but I'm trying to go through these as fast as I can on this program. Question 2. If I don't have symptoms, can I have coronavirus? Yeah, quite a few. In fact, we mentioned that Stanford study. We think that about 25% of the population who has COVID-19 infection may not have symptoms at all. That number may change as we do more studies. And speaking of studies, the University of Miami in my area is doing a study of anybody who wants to get tested specifically if they don't have symptoms, and there's a number to call, 786-206-0079. That's 786-206-0079 and 305-717-6929. If you want to get tested willy-nilly, they want to hear from you because they want to test everybody and see who of the asymptomatic group of people actually carried the virus, and that's important data for our community in Miami. But like the Stanford data, we can extrapolate that into other parts of the country if needed. Okay, question 3. Can you get reinfected? The answer is, who knows? All right, let's parse that out. The journal Nature, a very respectable journal, on March 14th of 2020, published a study by Bu, Deng, and Gao, and other authors. If those names sound like Chinese to you, it's because they're Chinese. And a lot of our data is actually coming out of China because they've done a lot of work. They've had more time to work on this pretty much than anybody else. And so here's what they did. They took some Macau monkeys, some rhesus monkeys. Not Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, folks. Don't try this on a Reese's Peanut Butter Cup. Rhesus monkeys. And they knew that these monkeys had COVID-19 and had recovered from COVID-19. Then they exposed them again to COVID-19, to the coronavirus. None of the monkeys developed symptoms. None of the monkeys got sick. Now, here's the deal. It was a small study, and it's on monkeys, primates. Well, will that mean the same for humans? We don't know. Then there's another source. The World Health Organization on April 24th came out with a scientific brief. Maria Van Kerkhove from the World Health Organization, their spokesman, gave us guidance about what the World Health Organization believes concerning whether people can get reinfected with COVID-19 or not. And at this point, the answer is we don't know, right? So being immune, in other words, having IgG antibodies, which is usually a hallmark of immunity in most diseases, that's why I say being immune. I really said that incorrectly. It should say having been exposed and then having antibodies to COVID-19 is no guarantee that you cannot get reinfected again. That data is still not clear. That doesn't mean that IgG will protect you from clinical disease. It doesn't mean that IgG will not protect you against clinical disease. And again, IgG is a type of antibody that we see develop in patients after certain infections. COVID-19 is one of those infections, and traditionally having antibodies to an illness generally means that you are protected from being reinfected. Is that true specifically for COVID-19? That remains to be seen. The Infectious Diseases Society of America on April 24th came up with a similar statement. Mary Hayden, their spokesperson, came out and mentioned that we still don't know whether or not people can be reinfected. Here's my take on it. This is my opinion. You're not going to get reinfected. If you're going to be reinfected, you're probably not going to have any symptoms. Did I say that? Yeah, I did. Do I know it for sure? No. Is that my opinion? Yes. So I told you, when I'm going to give an opinion, I'll tell you it's my opinion. It's my opinion. All right, take it for what it's worth. Now, there's another source of information about this. It's my wife. It's probably the most reliable source of information about whether people can get reinfected. Why do I say that? My wife is not a medical professional, but she does read the blogosphere, which I do not read. I read scientific literature, and she's telling me that there are reports of people who get reinfected. Take it for what it's worth. It's probably worth the same as my opinion is worth. But I have mentioned the study from Nature that's from March of this year, and I have mentioned two societies, the World Health Organization and the Infectious Diseases Society of America, that say that it is uncertain if you can or cannot get reinfected. All right. Question 4. Can you clear the virus clinically and still be positive for PCR? Let me explain what that question means. If you've had COVID-19, whether you had symptoms or not, and you've overcome COVID-19, you feel fine. You felt fine in the first place because you didn't have symptoms, or you had symptoms and you overcame it. Can you still carry COVID-19 in your nose, in your secretions, and infect other people? Well, the sad answer is that you can carry COVID-19 even if you are asymptomatic. And that has huge implications when it comes to when we tell people to stop quarantining if they had the disease. How common is this? How often does this happen? We're not sure. It probably doesn't happen very often, but again, that's my opinion. And having the virus, think about this, this is different. Having the virus does not mean that you are infectious to other people. Just because you carry the virus doesn't mean that you're going to give it to somebody else, or that that virus has the same level and degree of virulence that it did when you first got infected. These are gray areas. We're not sure. However, there is some guidance from the literature. The Journal of the American Medical Association, in its News Watch section on April 21st of 2020, volume 325, number 15, has an article by Lan, Zhu, and Yi. More Chinese names, right? And they looked at 4 patients who had had COVID-19 infection. They had cleared clinically. They had no symptoms of anything, and they were basically sent home. By the way, these 4 patients were medical professionals. They were doctors. And so when they went home, they maintained themselves in pretty good quarantine. They knew what they were doing. And these 4 people in particular did not clear the virus after going home and being totally asymptomatic for about 5 to 13 weeks. Depends on which of those 4 people you were following. So this can be scary stuff, but again, just because you carry the virus in this post-recovery state doesn't mean that it may have the same virulence as before. These may be difficult topics to understand. There is another piece of information from the Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA. This one is from April 14th of 2020. That again is a Chinese report by Yan and Bai. What they reported was a person that had gone from Wuhan to Anyang, another city in China, to visit relatives. This person had no symptoms of anything, but guess what? The 4 relatives that were in the household all contracted COVID-19 infection, and there was no COVID-19 infection known, at least, in Anyang when this person went to visit them from Wuhan. Here's the catch on that, though. That index, the person who came from Wuhan, initially tested negative for COVID-19, and then had 1 test that was positive for COVID-19, and 3 additional tests that were negative for COVID-19. So maybe there was an erroneous test, but this was published data in the Journal of the American Medical Association. You can access it. It is a research letter. It is not a full scientific research because there weren't randomized placebo-controlled trials and that sort of thing. All right, now let's talk a little bit about testing. Again, now we have a smorgasbord of tests that we can do, and there's a lot of confusion about this. Let's talk a little bit about the latest thing that came out. It came out April 28th of 2020, or will be available supposedly April 28th, 2020. This is the saliva test. And you can go online and pick up information about this test. It was developed by Rutgers University, and it's being marketed by a company called Vault Health, V-A-U-L-T, Health, one word, and you can visit their website, vaulthealth.com. Here's the thing about Vault Health. They say on their website that they're essentially doing this test not for free, but at no profit. That means that they're not making any money out of it. They are charging $150, and they have a little diagram on their website as to where that money is going. Vault Health is famous for being a place where you can get male lifestyle products. So you can go to their website, and now they're in the COVID business. If it works and they're doing a public service, I'm delighted. Now, there is a mention on their website, as of the day of this filming, that they don't have any of these tests available yet and right now, but I believe that you can sign up and hopefully they get to you when this test is available. Who should take this test? People who have symptoms. It is a polymerase chain reaction test, so it's like the initial test that we had for COVID-19. It measures RNA, ribonucleic acid, and it tells you if you have the virus at the time that the saliva sample was collected. It is not like antibody tests that tell us if you were exposed and had the virus, whether you had symptoms or not. Those are antibody tests. I'm not talking about that now. I'm talking about the saliva test, because everybody's going to be asking me about the saliva test. And you can go to their website, and there's a little video how the sample is collected. The sample is collected with you in front of a screen, and there's a physician or a medical provider on the other side of that screen who is watching you take the sample. I think it's because they really want a good sample. If you don't send it back within 48 hours, they will not do the test for you. According to their website, within 2 days of being infected with coronavirus, within 2 days of actually getting this virus into your body, their test will be positive. Apparently, it is a very, very, very sensitive test. So we'll have to see what the post-marketing data is on this test, but that's the saliva test, Vault Health. Then there is another test that you can do at home. This one is from LabCorp, and this is a nasal swab. Now, let's get this straight. If you go to my office and I do a nasal swab, I'm going to put in a swab that I have shown on a previous video that's about 10 feet long. I'm exaggerating, it's not 10 feet long. And you shove it, you gently place it to the very back of the nose, and there you twirl it. Everybody does well with that. Some people have weird anatomy, and you really can't get the swab all the way back. This is the original polymerase chain reaction test that was being done at the very beginning of the epidemic. That's what I have at my office. But the LabCorp test is different. The LabCorp test that is done at home is actually a swab, a small swab, and you put it at the entrance of your nose. They have a little diagram about how to do this online. And then you send it back to them and you get a report. They state that the reason that they came up with this test is so that if you are a medical provider, a first responder, that's to whom this test is geared, and you have symptoms, they're going to send you this test. You have to pay for it. They say they charge $120 for it. I'm sure you have to give them some credit card information online or something, and they'll send you the test. You do the swab. This one is not supervised by anybody online, but it's rather simple. It's just at the opening of the nose, and you send it back, and they will tell you if you have the virus or not at the time that the test was done. They say it's so that first responders, firemen, policemen, physicians, and so on do not have to go to a hospital, expose other people, have the people who are testing them be exposed to them, have the people who are testing them have to don personal protective equipment, which is not easy to find everywhere. We have plenty of it, but there are places where it's not so easy to find. And so in that way they're doing a service to the community. So those are the two home tests that are available right now. Here is another take on testing. You can go through a drive-through site like I mentioned at the beginning of the program. And my advice, really, go to your doctor. One of the reasons that we have these drive-through testing sites or our emergency rooms crowded with people that may or may not have COVID-19 and are taking the space of other folks who have illnesses that are totally unrelated to COVID-19, but they're taking up that space in the emergency room and overburdening the staff. One of the reasons I believe all that is happening is that people in this country have lost touch with the fact that many of them need a personal and private physician. Folks, I've been at this for a long time. I've been at this for 30 years. I'm seeing the grandchildren of my original patients. That's called a medical relationship with your patients. When they call me at 3 in the morning, I know who's on the other end of the line, and they know who's on the other end of the line. This is the type of relationship that you need, and in the day of commercial and corporate medicine, some of this thread is being lost. This is a wake-up call for private medicine and private practitioners. All right, that's my political statement of the day. All right, so now that I've done my political advertisement for today for private practitioners all over the world, I'm going to tell you that in our next program, we're going to try not to run as long as we did on this one, but in our next program, we're going to talk about antibody testing. So we're going to continue with the explanation of the be careful what you wish for stuff, because now we have so many tests that we need to know what they mean and how to interpret them. So we're going to come back with the next program. I'm going to have a lot to say about antibodies, about antibody testing. I'm going to talk about IgG, I'm going to talk about IgM, I'm going to talk about what that means when we get it, and all that sort of thing, and what those types of tests will tell us. But before we close, I want to leave you with some words of inspiration, because these are times that require inspiration. And on many programs I've said that when we read from the Christian scriptures, I do it in order to help people find a sense of encouragement in what for some folks is still a very dark time. Again, some people have lost relatives, friends, others have been really very burdened by this disease financially. So I want to leave you with words of inspiration. I'm a person of faith. If you're not a person of faith, I encourage you to dig deep and find your faith. I'm a Christian. I advocate for the truth that is given to us in God's Word in the Christian Bible. And I would encourage you to explore that part of yourself if you're not a person of faith. And if you're not a person of faith, then these are still wise words in which you can find some hope and inspiration. I'm going to read today from Psalm 18. Now, the Psalms come out of the Old Testament. This is a collection of holy scriptures and literature that have to do with the history of the people of Israel and predict and proclaim a coming Messiah on which the Christian faith is based. David had been persecuted left and right by all kinds of people. He knew what being down and out was, right? And this is what he writes in Psalm 18. The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. My God is my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, and my stronghold. I called to the Lord, who is worthy of praise, and I have been saved from my enemies. The cords of death entangled me. The torrents of destruction overwhelmed me. The cords of the grave coiled around me. The snares of death confronted me. And in my distress I called to the Lord. I cried to my God for help. From his temple he heard my voice. My cry came before him, into his ears, and the earth trembled and quaked, and they trembled because he was angry. Smoke rose from his nostrils, consuming fire came from his mouth. He parted the heavens and came down, and dark clouds were under his feet. He mounted the cherubim and flew. He soared on the wings of the wind. He made darkness his covering, his canopy around him. Out of the brightness of his presence, clouds advanced with hailstones and bolts of lightning. This is a very amazing scene. David is in distress. He cries out to God, and God comes from his perfect presence and place of habitation to come to David's salvation. He comes to rescue David out of those cords that entangled him. Close your eyes. Imagine that scene. And if you're a person of faith, you know, as David knew, that the Lord is your stronghold and your salvation. And if you don't know this because you're not a person of faith, look up and take refuge, because there's something bigger than ourselves out there. And this is a great time for us to explore that if we haven't done so before. Today I leave you. We're going to come back with antibody stuff next time. So come back again, and we're going to ask you to give us a thumbs up if you liked us. Leave a comment. Subscribe. If you don't subscribe, you don't get this stuff instantaneously. You just have to kind of look for it. Hopefully we're giving you stuff that you like and is useful. Give us a thumbs up. Leave a comment. Tell us what you want to hear about, and subscribe. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.